Hello friends, I'm Paige, an educator and leader in the cybersecurity space with the aim to help people get cyber. And you're listening to Trusted Verified, the podcast where industry professionals share their experience, insights, and advice to help students navigate their career journeys. Here, we go beyond the resume, cut through the noise, and give you actionable guidance you can trust and verify. If you're enjoying the podcast, make sure to follow or subscribe and let me know your thoughts on socials. I love hearing from you. Now, let's get into this week's episode. Thank you so much. I've got Peter Gigengack with me, who is currently the Director of Cybersecurity Capability. Tell me, Peter, what does that entail?
Thanks, Paige, for having us. The role that I've got is very much an outward focus to the WA public sector. So within WA government, we have a Office of Digital Government that really services the WA public sector. And so what that looks like is we have a cybersecurity unit specialised to try and both lead, support, moving the needle in cybersecurity and making government more resilient. So what that looks like for me is a lot of my role is getting out to the public sector within agencies, understanding how we can support and mature their environments from a proactive way. And that's everything from having people to go through and uplift their environment through enabling of technical controls, developing process policy. I have a penetration testing team that love legitimately hacking our government systems to try and find weaknesses. And I also have, a training awareness function that really helps raise that awareness profile, enables the delivery of content across the public sector.
I think it's really fascinating that we've now really, especially from a public sector perspective, moved towards proactive approaches to these sorts of things. Because I'm sure you've probably seen in the past, we've been very reactive. So I really appreciate that now there is initiatives that, target these things ahead of time instead of being subject to it and having to build the pieces up again after, say, a breach. So I think that that's really amazing that there is that approach to it now. Based on your previous career experience, you had a lot of hands-on ICT roles. What would you say sparked your move to cybersecurity specifically?
Yeah, that's a great question. So when I was in my career, I probably wasn't looking to exactly pivot into cyber. I wasn't actively looking. I was in an IT operational role and very much focused on trying to look for opportunities that would help to develop a bit of my leadership and team management skills. And through, a bunch of failed interviews or trying to understand in my own career journey, did I want to go very technical or do I want to hit in that management position? I ended up finding a role that opened up within the cybersecurity unit, which is really around developing a team for uplift. It was the first across Australia around having that central capability go out and effectively consult from government to another agency and go through and support that uplift. And to me, that was a kind of more of an exciting part to contribute in, uplifting an organisation than being in internal IT. At the time, I think I had only just commenced study. So I think I had just committed to jumping on and doing a master's at ECU, or Edith Cowan Uni. And for me, I was looking at as more of cyber as an opportunity, as another tool in my belt rather than a discipline itself. But as soon as I kind of switched into that environment around cyber, a lot of my mindset shifted. So I ended up probably thinking, coming from an IT operational background, well, I thought I was doing a good job. And like in most cases, from a service delivery point of view, really well. Yeah. But not having the cyber perspective of what an adversary does in our environments, I think that was kind of a bit of a wake-up call to me going, how can I actually think like an attacker? How can I then do something that protects that environment to the best of its abilities? And so that was more, my pivot into cyber was more about finding a role that was helping support people in maturing environments through, whether that through assessments or progressing a project or an implementation of some controls. That was my pivot into cyber.
You mentioned that you got into it to develop your leadership roles and have that more overarching assistance. Were there any skills that you maintained from your earlier technical roles that you still maybe helped you in your current role?
Absolutely. So my journey started in a help desk at Westnet. So Westnet was an internet service provider that was heavily focused on customer service. And so customer service was something that was somewhat beat into us. Our company slogan or kind of pitch underneath it was service that sets us apart. And I think some of those foundations in customer service, how to translate technical to non-technical people, was very helpful in my journey. I often had to, like a lot of that time, this was early 2000s, so it was all telephone support. People weren't doing remote sessions to a team viewer or understand what was happening on someone's workstation. I'd have to ask the right questions, figure out remotely what the problem was, and then step someone through that, solving that. And so the combination of having that customer service focus, asking the right questions, and that human interaction alongside the technical really helped me kind of lay a good foundation around how I interact with people. And like customer service and having a business focus for me now is kind of it's a bread and butter that I have to do in my daily roles. And so having that customer service foundation was very much very translatable or transferable into cyber. Having that as a foundation, I actually just kind of kept that percolating through the roles that I went through in help desk, through system administration, network admin, IT management. And even today, some of the work that I've done, I always have really great feedback on how I serviced an organization and kind of lifted the bar on what that expectations, what service could look like and supporting an organization.
So you're probably dealing with a whole bunch of different stakeholders. So you sort of do it quite naturally at this point, would you say?
Yeah, look, I deal with stakeholders ranging from technicians, and so like my kind of shortcut is from techs to execs. And so anything in between in that. So I'm often in calls where I'm talking with a technician, or I'm talking all the way up to a CEO, board member, and within government, we've got, I guess, the idea of director generals. In other states and territories, they may be called secretaries. And even in our role within Department of Premier Cabinet, which we have the ministers within government, sometimes being brought into conversations with them or briefing them as part of our role within government. So certainly had to be very versatile in how you pitch things, understanding that audience. Having myself, I've got a communications degree, and I didn't ever think I'd be leveraging some of the things I learned 20 plus years ago around that communications, around audience as well. So that's something that's, I know that being very adaptable in your communication, how you present and knowing your audience within cyber, particularly at the levels that I'm working at the moment, is quite an underrated skill.
I love the fact that your communication degree from 20 years ago is coming in clutch 20 years later. It's really good. It means it was worth it. What would you say are some misconceptions that you encounter when it comes to your role in particular, or just public sector cybersecurity?
Ooh, I think some of the challenges that the public sector face, and this is at all levels of government, is and within Australia, we've got federal, state, and local government. Each of those are probably at different maturity levels and have different targets on our backs, and therefore we kind of have to respond a little bit differently to threats. I think one of the things that's, I guess, more of a challenge or misconception. Look, I think government are a very lucrative target for the data that we sit on. We obviously support a lot of delivery of community services and services for the general public, which means naturally we're collecting data, we're holding information, we're running services that are really important to them. And as a result, I think there's a little bit of a, I guess, misconception that sometimes we aren't of, even just depending on what size of agency or entity we are, the target on our back is still there, almost regardless of our size. And I think within Australia, we're obviously a very rich country, and trying to, I guess, because we do have that much knowledge and data, it does make us a target. And I think that misconception of going, I'm not a target, I'm only a small entity, and this translates into even like small business as well. That misconception of I'm only small, why would someone bother? And trying to, I guess, instill that level of culture within an organisation, within general staff, how they handle data, why am I collecting this data, what we're doing with that, obviously either increases our target or obviously like the impact if we had an incident. And so that is something that I suppose is a long-term education piece, particularly as a lot of government is being slowly transitioning from, I guess, a paper-based process world to trying to do everything digital and inclusive as kind of that first initiative. I think if you look at some of the things that are being moving in the United States around how they're like with the whole Doge initiative around that efficiency, like they've going through bringing out that like they couldn't let go of so many employees from the public sector there because everything was in a paper-based box that they had to bring out of a bunker. I don't think we're at that stage in Australia, but there's some practices around digital collection and things like that that have had to mature over time to get away from maybe some of those old practices, and that mindset shift is probably the piece of that. Some people have been up to it really well. I think naturally as the generations shift through organisations, we'll probably see that either that confidence in digital systems and understanding, I guess, what that collection looks like is probably going to have a different outlook in a few years.
Yeah, I definitely think that people often assume that nothing like that could happen to them, but it really can happen to anybody, even if you're super vigilant about making sure that you're safe. It could be as simple as, like having a document with your details in your car and your car gets stolen or something, or just leaving letters in the bin that someone else can come and take. So I think that having that proactive approach, like what you do in your day-to-day, that sort of helps raise awareness on a more day-to-day level and sort of helps spread that proactive message. Hopefully, at some point, I'd love to see it, we'd have more of that community awareness of cybersecurity. But it's definitely been increasing still from what I can see. I'm getting a couple of YouTube ads at the moment about being cyber aware. So I think that's a great step. But yeah, speaking of communities, you're very involved in mentoring through the AWSN. I'm also a part of the mentoring program and it's absolutely fantastic. And you also serve on the board of ADHD WA. Have these experiences impacted the way that you lead your teams?
Absolutely. And I think like one of the things that coming from the in about the last 3 years, I've transitioned from that IT operational role into cyber, and in my current role as director. And in that very short space of time, I think throwing myself at this and in love with the community of cyber has probably been one of those things that's actually paid a lot of dividends in my own personal development. I've obviously gone in with quite open mind, coming in with almost fresh eyes. I'm not an old stale person that's been in cyber ranting at people going, just do this. I really kind of just come in with a bit of new eyes, even though I'm an old kind of fart in I guess, IT circles. But I think where it's, I guess, understanding how to engage with people, understanding what people's challenges are across the industry, getting that broader sense of what's happening probably has helped kind of adapt, particularly like if I look at the mentoring piece. The AWSN mentoring for me, I think I actually went in there not even kind of with a lot of thought behind it. I looked at it and went, okay, well, if I'm going to try and lead people, well, here's a good spot. I can understand some of the core challenges people experience when they try to enter or develop in the cyber industry. And I think that's probably, I guess, set me up a little bit around like how do I interact with people, and from a personal leadership, it's probably helped me bring home some strategies in a somewhat, I'm not going to say I've used these as crash dummies for my team, but going through and working with people that, and like it's both within AWSN, and I've got a whole bunch of, I guess, what would be considered informal mentees or connections through the industry where we have connections, whether it's at peer level, or if it's me trying to bring someone up into a role, or how we can kind of coach them or mentor them into what is a good pathway, what are the things that we need to do. And so it's probably helped me craft a lot more control around how I develop my own capability as a leader. I probably got a lot more unexpected consequences of joining it than anything. In the sense of, say, the board, though, I guess as I was kind of coming into the industry, obviously something with cyber is, and I was at ASA last year, and one of the presenters basically said, look, cybersecurity is quite a noble type of profession. We're out there protecting people, and we're having this broader impact. And I suppose where my heart is probably at is really about helping people. It's quite a more of a servant leadership kind of style, and like going, well, how can I make a positive impact? And so that was part of my, I guess, pursuit around going, well, if I go join a board, I'm going to learn a lot of how a board needs to operate, think, see a different industry. Like ADHD WA is obviously supporting communities across WA around both assessments and support mechanisms for people with ADHD, which I know within particularly cyber and IT industry as a whole, it tends to attract those kind of people, which will really, it actually is quite an environment that is actually really great probably for those people, particularly in some of those technical fields, because it really, some of the ways people's minds operate are very honed to detail and looking for problems and diving in. And so that's something that I thought, well, I've joined that mainly to go, well, how can I make a positive impact for that group? But also go, like, at the same time, I'm seeing new challenges to try and go, well, how can I work in an environment that's something unfamiliar, takes me a bit out of my comfort zone. And certainly in the last couple of years, I've had to come out of my comfort zone. If you'd met me 3 years ago, you'd like, who's this? Completely different kind of person. It's been a bit of a transformation.
And it's so fascinating as well, because obviously being a part of the mentoring program and just other communities in general, you actually learn so much both from people who are your senior and people who are your junior. And I find that being able to work and learn amongst different personalities, different, levels, it's just really beneficial all around. We spoke about how you are doing your master's in cybersecurity. So now that you're developing your skills now at a tertiary level, what do you think are some things that universities could maybe implement to help create these job-ready professionals?
Yeah, look, this is a really interesting topic, and probably one of the reasons why I'm really actively trying to pursue, I guess, my masters and my study there anyway. Look, I think coming out of like an IT operational role into cyber, it kind of gave me a little bit of different experience level walking into it. Maybe the masters wasn't probably the right choice for me, but I've looked at it as a way to kind of develop skills that I hadn't been exposed to. So I think during my career over time, I certainly spent a lot of time working with new tech, deploying new things that I'd never seen before and just had to figure out. And so a lot of my hands-on experience has probably developed me far greater than most institutions. But I think one of the things I've seen there's a lot of, I guess one of the challenges around cybersecurity is there's a lot of width in some of the tasks that we do, because we've got everything from integrating with business all the way through to figuring out how we can stop adversaries into our systems. And what that means is we've got so many domains. I think some of the universities are doing really well in providing really great foundational knowledge of like how we can look at, say, ethical hacking and how we can triage an incident or do some digital forensics. These are all quite technical in their relationship and what they, I guess, what mindset you need to get into. But one of the, I guess, when we see some of the graduates enter the workforce, that broad exposure probably doesn't give them enough preparation to walk straight in and do the job, even though they may have had a really great background to do it. So I know in something like my current course, if I was to try a redesign, I know I walked in because I had a technical hat on before. I wanted to probably expand my understanding of governance and risk and compliance and how we could use that as a mechanism to develop further better cyber programs and progress cyber maturity in organizations. And so having things of like real use cases of how to apply a framework, what a policy procedure is and how it should fit in, they were sometimes missing from an academic experience when you try to negotiate that, what should be in a policy in an organization versus what should be done. And like, look, I think there's just because that broad width, having a very broad amount of understanding probably prepares you for a little bit. But once you have to dive in within cybersecurity, there's particularly, I would consider cybersecurity already a specialist industry as it already is. And then you have to kind of, most roles are designed around a hyper specialization within that. And so when we have someone come out as a graduate, they've got a broad knowledge, which is really good to understand broad context, but their role is expecting them to be very hyper focused on one or two tasks, and having the flexibility such as like an elective that really drives into understanding some of those core things are probably something that would be a really good way to prepare people. But certainly I've also seen like the usage of, say, work integrated learnings or work placements, work experience, whatever you want to interchange that word with, they really allow a very accelerated growth on what it really is like to be in a role. And so having a course that enables both the theoretical and enough practical experience in an academic environment plus that hands-on working in a team and what a team sees is probably where I see that would be a massive amount of value into improving the actual skills as people enter the workforce.
Yeah. No, I absolutely agree. As someone who's also doing my Bachelor of Cyber, it's really fantastic for those general and specialized experiences. I think unlike sort of like your IT degrees, they don't have very specific majors and minors. They're quite general. I think for cyber we have two minor units, network security and management. That's why I was so interested to get a whole bunch of different industry professionals to speak to, because those are sort of the roles that you don't hear within university because it's quite fundamental and foundational. And we had someone come in for a networking event, and he said you really need to find your specialization and work on that outside of university, because just like you said, it's a specialized industry with even more hyper specialized jobs. So yeah, I just think that's really fascinating how we still have a very general cyber degree, and it's quite bare bones. So yeah, hopefully at some point we'll be able to rejig that a little bit, but I definitely think it's pretty bare bones at the moment.
And look, I don't think there's anything particularly wrong with generalist thinking. So I suppose over my career, if I look at what I had to manage in an infrastructure piece, the dynamic amount of systems, provided, I guess, a jack of all approach on having to manage that infrastructure. So everything from networks to servers, cloud. And so having broad or generalist thinking, applying that within cyber, sometimes different roles in cyber both have to zoom in on a problem, but also look back at the larger picture. And so generalists, and look, I've got some really good books that I've read over time. One of them's called Range by David Epstein, really covers how generalists approach to having broad thinking, solving problems, particularly when you need to narrow that focus into a hyper specialization, or can actually prepare a different type of thinking, whereas sometimes people that specialize too early might either have to reskill in one sort and then come back out, and that's some of the times the payoff or risks that people take across their career to either specialize early and then have to go, oh, that now is old tech and no one does anything that way, and have to evolve and adapt to, I guess, the demands of the technology. And so, like, even if over the last few years, look, AI has been around for a long time. Like, there's writings going back to the 60s in this stuff around people trying to make generative type responses from a computer and have a human feel. But if we look at, say, how it's integrated more recently in the last decade, yes, there's been a lot of like AI machine learning that like mostly has been ignored really until like, well, we've had chat GPT being thrown at like large language models. And so that kind of, I guess people have to realize that because technology isn't static, it is, I guess, changing with, I guess, advancements in how people use that technology, being able to stay fresh, relevant, and I guess being adaptable to, I guess, what's happening in the industry. And look, basically, I know like over time, like the amount of turnover of information that you have in particularly a IT professional or cyber professionals, I guess, vocabulary over it gets thrown out a lot of it every year because, well, we have to move on. And so that's kind of one thing, particularly as a someone that's entering the workforce, understanding that sometimes you have to get comfortable of just letting some of those old tech things go and having to learn something new. And I think if you've got that mindset of around continual learning, and almost in a way having that, I guess, more broader, I guess, situational awareness, what is happening in the industry, what are the trends, not trying to leap on them like because it's been a buzzword, but leaning into it occasionally and going, sometimes diving into it and just like learning everything about that one thing. And sometimes you might go, that's actually really interesting. And sometimes that is where the initiative in a career comes, to being able to dive into a topic and go, I actually really fell in love with that topic. Let's go whole hog into that. And I think for me, swinging from IT ops into cyber, there was aspects of that where I'm like, oh, wow, I really can just, I spent months understanding, say, identity and access management, infrastructure security around how we can, I guess, better protect or make better choices around that. I just dove into that for like 3 to 6 months. And I'm like, that is when it's kind of sometimes those light bulb moments happen in your career. And you're like, oh, I wish I knew that a while ago, because that just kind of opened up my mind and thinking to that. So sometimes it's about seeing what's happening around you. And sometimes just going, well, sometimes you've got to just pick. Same way you kind of roll the dice, you may not know if that's the right thing every time, but sometimes at least it kind of gives you a different perspective that you didn't have before.
So I suppose rule of thumb is have all your eggs in separate baskets and just see what comes naturally and what you enjoy. And if you want to throw yourself in something, then absolutely do that. I did that with forensic investigations recently. That's all I've been doing. But yeah, I also obviously enjoy threat intel and the GRC side of things as well. Given that you are currently a student, what would you say is a resource that students overlook in their learning journey, perhaps in their first, second, third year?
Asking questions from industry professionals that are actually already living and breathe it daily. And this is where I think the underestimated part, I think naturally, a lot of people that are attracted to IT and cyber tend to be quite, let's just say, introverted type personalities, and they often go into technology and IT thinking, oh, if I go into technology, I won't have to deal with people. But actually, the irony is that everything, particularly around IT and cyber, really stems from being able to service people, and so you can't really get away with one from the other, unfortunately. But going, like for me, I know coming from that IT into cyber, I think something that I wish I would have probably done earlier in my career was probably getting out to industry, asking questions from more seniors, understanding what they did. I think I probably would have had mentoring in my own roles from my own organisations, but having that broader perspective, I guess, what's out there. And look, sometimes I guess the challenge within cyber is that obviously we're managing environments that might be holding very sensitive information. We don't really want to give too much away, but certainly we can sometimes share some of the experiences that did work and that didn't. And so, like, if I was that student earlier or thinking of this earlier, I would certainly be trying to get out in industry a lot earlier. It does involve getting out of your comfort zone a bit, and like going through that piece has probably been something that I didn't really think and see value in it originally, but I think now I'm probably a lot less worried about going out and thinking what people care as well. So that's also another aspect where most of the time people don't actually care. And the thing that I found very warming from the cyber community is that people are very willing to support others. And I think for those that particularly in some of the more frontline components of cyber around, say, those that are in a SOC and up to their armpits in like logs and alerts and things like that, there's certainly a different empathy for those people that are in those kind of really high demand roles and checking in with other people and having those deep connections with people that aren't just surface level going, hey, how you doing? I'm like, yeah, I'm fine.
Yeah.
And going, well, how do you tackle your bad days? Because I think for those that have lived through any IT or cyber incident or event that has impact on an organisation, it's a different kind of cookie or different kind of pressure cooker. And some people just respond differently to that. So like, I think getting amongst the people in the cyber industry, learning from how they've handled themselves, how they've tackled a problem, sharing as much knowledge as you can that doesn't, I guess, compromise giving vulnerabilities around your infrastructure and your environment or national security secrets, those kind of things are all those kind of things that people are pretty good around their sensitivities around sharing they can share and feel comfortable. But like getting out early and engaging with people that maybe you look towards as like a role model, or looking for someone that you're like, oh, I really like what they did. And sometimes you can see that activity across social networks like LinkedIn, which as often sometimes you might think is a bit cringe in some of the topics that cycle through it. But seeing someone that like you admire and kind of just connect with them, find out if they do attend some of those events, going, hey, I'd really like to have a coffee or similar. A lot of them are quite open to that. So I think generally the nature of some of our cyber professionals is that nobility type persona where they're really trying to make a positive impact and protect people. And so that's the part I think I've certainly enjoyed flipping into cyber for that.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. As soon as I started going to events, once you get over that anticipation anxiety of going to the first event, it just becomes so much easier. And in terms of LinkedIn posts, sometimes you just got to do the cringe LinkedIn thing sometimes. One final question for you, Peter. I really enjoy asking this question to all of my guests. And that is, if you could give one piece of advice to your younger self at the start of your IT career, what would that piece of advice be?
Ooh.
I know it's a hard one.
Yeah, but one, like, and look, I think the thing that I've enjoyed about my career, and I wish, like, look, I think I've carried it through, but I don't think I need to give advice back to myself. But like certainly for others is obviously being curious and willing to try things. And I think that's probably where the real learnings in life come from, when you sometimes you take some chances occasionally. But yeah, sometimes being that curious, being like a cat, just trying to just roam and see what kind of sticks out. Sometimes that curiosity, yeah, sometimes it kind of doesn't always pay off. But being curious to learn is probably, and like troubleshoot and just solve problems. That keeps, I know myself, very mentally engaged in a role and wanting to kind of crack on with, I guess, more life. So whether or not it's more advice to my former self, I think I probably would have kind of stuck with that curiosity and just try things. Look, I think if like had it again, maybe it would have been engage earlier with the community that I don't think I saw the value in that earlier, and I think that would have maybe potentially opened up different opportunities. But I'm certainly not unhappy with some of the things I've learnt. Sticking around in some of the roles I've had for multiple years has meant I've gone through several seasons in one organisation to really get to know the people in the organisation, get good connections, build a trust. And I think something like cyber, one of the things that really underpins a lot of the work that we do is trust. Whether that's internally with the organisation that you're trying to serve, or it's the customer that you're trying to deliver value, or the public sector that you're trying to deliver service for the members of the public. Trust is kind of one of those things that takes a long time to build up. It's easy to destroy. But like, look, I think like that, having that, I guess, understanding that like cyber and even IT in general, having those connections, building that trust is like one of those things that's kind of having that. In my case, it's been the customer service mindset that's enabled that. But other parts may just be like having good conversations with people, engaging early. So yeah, look, I think that would be, if I went back, that's where I'd go.
It's really great to hear that from you, and I'm sure a lot of people will take that on in their degree, because a lot of students do appreciate that guidance from industry professionals like yourself, to see things from that more mature point of view in the industry. I just wanted to say a huge thank you for joining me this evening, Peter. Your insights have been really fantastic and are very different to what I've heard. So having that perspective from you has actually been really helpful, even for myself. So yeah, again, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you for the opportunity to chat.